Is Sayed Areem Hussein. I'm the project manager at the Nala Feminist Collective. And thank you again for coming today. Thank you for the people who are new today, who didn't manage to make it yesterday. You are very welcome and welcome to our community. So I want to first thank, wait a minute. So at Nala, we intentionally call today, and today is the Nala Learning Village. We intentionally use the word village because it takes a village to do the work that we do. So Nalafem Learning Village is a capacity building space we convene during the summit to offer skills and tools to young feminists to help them continue the amazing but difficult work that we do every day. So today we welcome you into this village and community where you will get an opportunity to deepen your connections, to reflect, to challenge, and begin to co-create and come together as a collective. So when yesterday's speakers were saying, I am Nala, again, we mean this very intentionally, we are all Nala. So you are all Nala and welcome to the Nala Feminist Collective. So to open the day, I would like to welcome to the stage Shivai Nyoni, the Executive Director of the African Leadership Center. Yes, and please let's celebrate these amazing women. Yes. Dr. Njoki Wamai, Assistant Professor at the United States International University, Africa. And Ms. Valerie Wiggett, the Director of Career Programs at the African Leadership Academy. Thank you very much for joining us and for being in this and for opening this space, this very formal. I know our seating arrangement is kind of formal, just so that we could make sure we're on time and set up for our gala tonight. But it takes a village to raise, to nurture, and educate children and young people. One of the ways of doing this is providing platforms and spaces for them to learn new skills, question and reflect, and to dare to dream and design an alternative future. In the different institutions, so this is a collective question to the panel, in the different institutions that you are in, what are the opportunities for young women in particular? And we can start with,
Okay. So good morning, Saida. Thank you so much. And good morning to you all. And good morning, Nala. Happy birthday to Nala as well. So where the institution I'm representing today is the African Leadership Center. We are a research and training institution, for lack of a better expression, but I think we also often like to think of ourselves as an incubation hub, a place where we are incubating the next generation of African leaders, particularly working in the areas of peace, security, and development, or working on issues at the nexus of peace, security, and development. And I would say that we were set up particularly to provide opportunities for young women coming from conflict-affected or crisis-affected contexts, but also young African women who were living daily insecurity and the lack of peace. And so for us, the opportunities that exist are to train, again, not my favorite word, but to train and provide a space for transformation, knowledge generation and creation from the perspective of your lived experience as a young African woman. And we do that in a number of ways through fellowship programs that are specifically designed to accompany young people, young Africans, in a journey of self-transformation, professional development, but also academic and scholarly training around issues which are at the nexus of peace, security, and development. And so we have a number of fellowship programs. They're at a postgraduate level. So you need to have a first degree, but essentially to expose or to bring along young people, young Africans, into the space of peace, security, and development to use what they have experienced to write, to produce knowledge, but also to bring their own experiences to policy spaces and other spaces interacting with other young Africans. So maybe I can summarize it in that way.
Thank you so much. So you'll notice that a lot of the spaces, the learning spaces, are these hybrid, trying to, like academia, trying to get into, the policy space and being more impactful. But Dr. Wamai, you're in a very traditional academic space, the university. What opportunities are there for young feminists, especially?
First, thank you very much and happy birthday, Nala. And first say that I am an alumni of the Africa Leadership Center. So yes, and it's a very, very, very good space. So part of the reason I am where I am is spaces like the Africa Leadership Center that mentor young women when I was a young woman. Okay, still kind of. That mentor young women and also put them especially within a network of mentors that somehow guide them along the way. So Shuvaya and I are part of that program. But I think maybe I'm starting from there because what are the opportunities in a traditional university for young women? Sadly, they're there, but of course not very directly. The university is so male. I don't want to start on a wrong, on a discouraging statement, but it's true. The university is a very male space, very patriarchal, very challenging. And I think first we need to accept that. And then we need to start thinking, how do we as feminists make this space a space for us? Because it was never created for us. The university as it is still continues with those very, very patriarchal traditions. So it's a very difficult space to fight within that, right? And even the women who have to be there, it's almost like you have to be very, almost where a masculinist, what do you call it? To fight, you have to be a man, something like that. But we are there. I'm a feminist. You are there. And so the opportunities it presents, of course, beyond helping women get into academic programs for training, there are lots of opportunities, I think, because this is the one place you can get consciousness. Research, if you want to become a researcher, so a space for learning to do research and I think those two are the main things. And also mentoring, as much as it's not very formalized, it's still a mentoring space. It was really nice hearing Wanja yesterday saying, my lecturer, my professor told me this, and it changed me. So it tells you, it actually offers an opportunity for a life-changing experience. We just need to start thinking, how can it become more feminist? Thank you.
Thank you. And Valerie, so you are part of the African Leadership Academy, which I think caught everybody's attention on just how unapologetically Afrocentric it is as a almost traditional academic institution. So what could you say about just the journey in this institution and in learning spaces on being unapologetically Afrocentric?
Certainly. I think just let me give a bit of context to the institution for those of you who don't know about it. African Leadership Academy is an institution that is between high school and tertiary education. We scour the continent looking for young leaders who are truly showing leadership in their space already, before, whether they're in high school, whatever they might be doing, wherever they are in their journey. Generally, the age is about 16 to 21, and we get about 3,000 applications a year, and we take about 120 a year. And these young leaders come to our academy in Johannesburg. They go through a 2-year program where they are focused on African studies, entrepreneurial leadership, and really thinking about writing and rhetoric, because obviously all our young leaders need to be able to read and write, to be able to show themselves in the world. We have some of our alumni in the room and our students in the room. I'm very grateful for them to be here today. If you get a chance to speak to them, please do. You will see why they are part of our institution. Also, happy birthday to Nalafem, and a happy birthday to my colleague Madilomo, who is sharing a birthday with Nalafem today. So I think the mission of the African Leadership Academy is about building our next generation of young African leaders. And we make sure that we have women representation is always 50% and above. We really think about how we can drive agendas and provide solutions for Africa. So my role specifically at the Academy is to look after the relationship with the students when they leave ALA. And what we really try and do is think about what the biggest challenges are facing Africa and how we can turn those challenges into opportunities. So while the students are at ALA, they are being exposed to the various things in the entrepreneurial space, but once they leave ALA, we really want to try to help them think about what problems do they need to solve in the various sectors across the continent. So that's health, education, governance, infrastructure, agribusiness, and then of course the arts, because that is also one of the biggest opportunities that we have for the continent. So I think what we really try and do, it's not about what career path you want to choose, it's what problems do you want to solve. And from the time they are brought to the academy, they are always having to think about how can we actually solve some of the challenges facing our continent, and what can you personally do in that space to drive an agenda.
Thank you so much. And welcome. We look forward to also interacting. I think we've met a couple of times, and yeah, definitely an amazing academy. So, just going back to the discussion about, even, Afrocentric knowledge and knowledge spaces, but, specifically, African feminist knowledge spaces. How do you see, because, the African Leadership Center and the African Leadership Academy, I think, are very intentional about using the word leadership and having African leadership. How do you pass on, or I also don't like the word training, but, for lack of a better word, pass on knowledge or generate knowledge around African feminism specifically, and hold space for young people to also challenge the, the broader understanding of what feminism is, and let them, have a space to explore their identity as African women and what that means to be a feminist and be African. And also for men, right? So your institutions are not just for women. So also, if you could speak about how you bring in men into the conversation.
So I think a couple of things. The first is that, when we think of the genesis of our own institution, it was our founder started the institution almost about 16 years ago, at least the idea of it. After having herself been, she's Nigerian, and spent a lot of time during the wars in Liberia and Sierra Leone, traveling in the countries and traveling by motorcycle and interacting with a lot of young people in those two countries. And then found herself, after having finished her PhD in the War Studies Department, a very male department at King's College London, found herself at the UN working on children in armed conflict, and found herself in many rooms where she was the only young female African with many older men in suits, deciding and creating policy on young people on the African continent affected by conflict. And of course, there was something very wrong with this picture, because a lot of what they were discussing was completely unrelated to what she had experienced firsthand, traveling around West Africa, parts of West Africa, and interacting with people directly affected by conflict. The second thing was also the advent of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And so, this idea came about of how you bring the very people affected into spaces where they're using their own lived experience, coupled with existing knowledge, concepts, theory on peace and security, and also exposing them to spaces where their voices could be heard, right? But needing to equip them also with the tools to be able to bring their voice, exercise their agency, and also make a mark really on the experiences, firstly, that they had as women, as young women in those spaces. The second thing is an intergenerational approach. So the idea that there are those who've traveled before, and I think this has been a theme throughout this summit, that there are those who have walked before, there are those who have walked the feminist path before, not only from a place of theory and theorizing and concept, but also actually living it and testing it. So that is something that is very, very key and central to us. And that's linked also with our values, our core values at the African Leadership Center, one of which is African-led ideas and processes of change. Which of course centers the continent, centers knowledge from the continent, centers ideas from the continent, practice from the continent, but also the respect for diversity in all its forms, which necessitates a need for centering feminist ideas, feminist ways of thinking, and bringing in feminists, African feminists into the room. Njoki talked about mentoring and mentorship, and so ensuring we have a space where there is exchange, and some of these ideas are brought into the room and are exchanged, including with our male colleagues. It's not easy. You're bringing people who some have never been exposed to feminist ideas, feminist theory, feminist ways of organizing, feminist ways of thinking, but allowing space for these ideas to be on the table, to be introduced, to be debated, to be understood or not understood, and seeing how that then is infused into thinking, into writing, into knowledge creation and generation. Yeah.
Dr. Omai?
Thank you. So the university as a space for teaching feminist ideas, of course. And I think if there's, the university is the one place where, you know, it's mainstream in many ways. So there's a lot I think we can do, I try and do. I try and teach many gender courses because I see that as a space for, you know, that African, especially infusing ideas to do with not just African feminism, but also African-led ideas of thinking about research. Because many times, why we have very little research on African women and the issues that are important to African women is because also we have very few African women or even African men researchers thinking about this issue. So, and I think the academy or the class is such a revolutionary space to inspire not just young people, even older, say, postgraduate students, to start rethinking. And I think also universities, many times, many African universities, because of what happened with the colonial experience, they're always trying to center their work on African-led or African thinking. Maybe it's not yet received, it's not within the hype of decolonization like it has, because now decoloniality has been taken up by Western universities. But soon after independence, that is what many African universities set out to do, to decolonize themselves, to decolonize their curriculum, to decolonize their research so that it's African-centered. They may not have been explicitly saying this is what we are doing. So maybe now this whole movement calls for us to re-energize ourselves more into African-led thinking, because sadly, because of donor funding for research, for even curriculum development, there's a lot of Eurocentric thinking, less African ideas about many things, especially to do with research and teaching. So we have a lot to do and unlearn, because we were already doing that in the 60s. We just need to maybe start rethinking, does research or the things we teach, what does it mean for African women? But in terms of teaching, for me, I came back to part of the reason I teach is because I see the class as that revolutionary space to change ideas, especially ideas that matter to African women and ideas like feminism.
Thank you. And Valerie, so the African Leadership Academy, I think in comparison with the African Leadership Center and the university, you engage with students a lot younger, 16 as the youngest. In the experience of the academy, how have you, because there's this, assumption that you have to be a certain age to understand feminism. Like some of these terms are very technical, and you need to be in university, and it's, sort of this like gatekeeping of these terminologies and these ideas. What has been the experience, and how have you approached sharing and allowing and providing a space for younger people to explore some of these ideas?
We certainly find that many of the young girls who arrive on campus have already been doing a lot of work in their space, wherever they might be, whether they've been running some sort of initiative for young girls in their schools or in their communities. So by the time many of them arrive on campus, they are already quite aware and feminists in their own right, even at that young age. The campus itself it almost runs as a small economy as such, and so at the school, everyone is encouraged to sort of study and start their own businesses. And what you find is that depending on what the girls think or care about, they will start their own business in something that they really care about, whether it be Afrofeminism, whether it be something around GBV, whether it be anything that they can actually think and create a business around actually pushing that agenda or driving that agenda. So we really see young girls taking up and thinking about what it is that's important to them, and we enable or create a platform for them to drive that. The other thing that they also get to do is they get to do research throughout the 2 years that they're there in things that they really want to pursue, or things that they care about in terms of what they want to go and study or work in the future. So they get that grounding where they're already thinking about how can I push a positive agenda for whatever I want to drive or what I care about. So I think, and I don't want to speak on their behalf as they're sitting in the room, but I think that there's really an opportunity to explore the things that you value as a woman, that you care about as a woman, and make sure that you are pushing those agendas within those spaces, no matter what your age is. We have quite a range of students alumni on the campus who also come back and teach. So you get a little bit of this intergenerational thing that is happening already, and then of course the older teachers who are on the campus as well. So they are helped and guided by the community in terms of thinking about what is important to them.
Thank you. So I just want to take a moment to recognize that on this stage, as we're having this discussion, that there is a lot of privilege on this stage. Especially, in one of the ways, there are many, but in one of the ways is because as leaders in learning spaces, we are not on the front line as many of you are on the front line every day, seeing the stories, especially when it comes to SGBV. You're seeing these stories, you're interacting with these women. But we, so I'm Nala, but we, as leaders in these institutions, we have the privilege of being able to, the space to reflect and to plan and to look ahead and to see, well, how can we intervene in terms of policy, what support is needed, because we're not bombarded constantly by just the sheer violence that is happening around the continent. So I want to take a moment to just talk about the space itself. So these learning spaces themselves, and the importance of safety and having them as safe spaces for young people to come out of the front line and come into this space where they're allowed to decompress, to reflect, to strategize as well. But I'd like to turn specifically to Dr. Wamai. And as we talk about safety, the university, which you noted, is, I think, one of the most patriarchal institutions that is around and is constantly being proliferated as this is the norm. It has also been a space that has, in a way, normalized SGBV within the institution as, this is how to graduate. If you're a woman, you just have to accept that this is the reality and this is how you're going to graduate and this is how you get a good grade. But how can you, sitting in the university, what do you need from us on the front line to support you to, to face, now your own sort of like frontline SGBV cases? What can we bring into the university space, and how can we collaborate?
Thank you very much. I totally agree with you, and I'm sure many of you will agree with me in this room. Even many of the first incidences of if you've been sexually harassed probably happened at university. The space that is meant to be a safe space. Your parent has just released you to the world. Everybody is so excited. You're going to go there and conquer. And you're harassed either by your fellow students or worse still, the lecturers who are meant to be taking care of you. And for me, that breaks my heart. And sadly, you saw the BBC sometime, I think it was showing in Ghana, of a case of sexual harassment. And that's commonplace. Here in Kenyan universities, my university is a private university, so we had a vice chancellor 2 years ago, Zeleza, who was quite strict on that. So for once, there was a cleaning up of sex pests. But, things change. So I think one of the things, first, the universities need to do in partnership with feminist activists is research. We had Dr. Obi yesterday talking about the power of evidence and how many people will just be like, we'll write you off if you don't. Not many people, patriarchs, they'll write you off if you don't bring evidence. And so the people who are in funding spaces in this room, we need to fund research on sexual harassment in the universities, because during my time 20 years ago, we were still being harassed. Now that I'm a lecturer, of course, I'm at a position of power, always challenging, always calling out and talking to young people. We have policies already, but every university right now has a sexual harassment policy. But harassment continues. There's still somebody who wants to sleep with a student despite and asking them for grades. Asking them to sleep with them to get a better grade. And it's so rampant. So for me, we need to fund research on sexual harassment. Let it even be students-led. We call it participatory action research, so that students, probably in partnership with faculty or even in partnership with other organizations, because sometimes if women are also not feminists, they become complacent. They're the people who will be saying, oh, you people, you're being harassed because you're dressed, I don't know, badly. And I keep asking, why should a 45, 50-year-old man see sex in a 20-year-old? That's the daughter, right? Or whatever. But still, this is somebody who is at a position of power. They shouldn't be seeing them in that way, whether you're dressed how. So research, let's fund research. Let students become conscientized, because many times when sexual harassment happens to them, they're not even aware this was harassment. They knew they were uncomfortable, but they don't have the word for what happened. So we also need to fund and support training. Every university student, male and female, and also these lecturers and administrators who harass our girls most of the time should be aware. And I've gone for some training at our university, and I was thinking this is such a raw deal, because the training also is by some office that it's very about ticking boxes. Training should almost be something that is every term, every semester, so that it becomes a part of you to see. And that's why like these gender classes, courses like gender also should be made compulsory. Just the same way, like in Kenya, people used to do communication skills, HIV, AIDS, development. Courses that, to be honest, right now are redundant. We should have gender studies as a compulsory course for all students everywhere, because then, and hopefully they're taught by feminist lecturers who help them not just get academic grades, but raise their consciousness. So for me, those three are very, very important. But we need research, we need evidence, just like what was done by the BBC, so that it can become an agenda. And maybe that's something I Am Nala Feminist could get involved and probably get supported within their universities. And I'm glad it's a Pan-African space, because if many universities in Africa release findings this is this university, this is the cases of sexual harassment. It is done by who? It is, research. Then we can start speaking with a voice and then go to the university management bodies, especially at the national level, and tell them, if you don't change this, women, even, maybe it's time we created also feminist universities. Exactly.
Thank you so much. So just being cognizant of time, I think we could be open for two questions. I already see hands. Okay, I see two hands. Okay, so two questions. All right, so I'm just going to come and give you the mic.
Good morning. You have already tackled my question, but I just wanted the people to know there is an already existing movement called Campus Me Too. We did a research in 2019 with the support of ActionAid and UN Women, and we found 49% of female students had undergone sexual harassment, 24 were male, and 66% was from lecturer to the students. And it's a Pan-African movement. We are in Kenya in 18 institutions. There were institutions which didn't have sexual harassment, but we are helping them come up with, one of them was UN, and that they launched it last year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I saw a hand. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Kangarasi. I used to work with an organization called Akilidada, and in 2019, we did a research on GBV in universities. We first started with 3 universities, and what was really prevalent was we did not have gender policies in the universities. Like each university has a gender policy. But from the Ministry of Education, we do not have a gender policy. Like even the students we were interviewing, or the ones who are writing the questionnaires or the survey questions, they didn't know about the sexual harassment policies in the university. So there's a gap from the Ministry of Education. Then another key finding was the GBV policies or the sexual harassment policies that were in the universities only tackled the sexual harassment that emanates at the university institution. And you see, when you look at around the university, some of the sexual harassment happen in the dormitories or also outside the university. So the university, when a sexual harassment case has happened outside the university, they say that's not covered in our sexual harassment policy. So there's also a gap there.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to hand over to the panel if anybody would like to comment on that or maybe share some last remarks, just because of time.
I just want to thank the 2 speakers. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. The research, already there's different research being done. But also, how do we move that research to shaming the perpetrators? If you remember the Me Too movement, especially in the US, like in the industry, the film industry, till they started saying the name, it's Harvey Weinstein who has done this. That's the only time this thing came down. So, and of course, there are many issues. People would fear being sued for defamation and all that. Those are the things we need to think around, because till these perpetrators are shamed, we will do a lot of research. The university will look good, it has done research, but nothing will change. So that shaming perpetrators, and then secondly, creating a constituency of conscious feminist students to keep the fire up there. Yeah.
So I just want to take it out of the university space a little bit, but only in the sense that there is a continuum, right? So whether it's at the university, so tertiary training, if you will, or another kind of institution, often we see there are these pipelines, and we're constantly trying to create or produce pipelines for young people, young women to go from the university space into the professional space, be it policy making, etc. And one of the things we have found in some of our work, because we, as part of the capacity development, our fellows go on institutional attachment. So they go to various institutions across the continent where they spend some time learning about the institution and also offering their own knowledge to that institution. And I think, so in going back to your question, Saida, about how can those in the room who are at the front line work with those who are in different spaces? And we've seen over the years from a number of policy spaces, I think one of the ones that stands out was a kind of Me Too movement, some unearthing of these very issues at the African Union, right? And a lot of our work interfaces with the African Union as a policy-making institution on our continent. And one of the sad things about what came out, because many young women, I think the African Union has had a lot of advancements around opportunities for young people, especially young women, but the experiences of young women in that institution need to be told, need to be shared in the ways I think that that Njoki, Dr. Wamai is speaking of. And I think the solidarity then becomes very, very critical and important with those of us who are outside of those institutions, because within the institution, like she's been saying, it's very, very difficult. And these are battles that have been fought for generations. We are not the first to fight these battles. But I think just the opportunities that come out when some of these things are exposed certainly require a lot of solidarity, and in many, many different spaces, because just as a lone voice or a couple of lone voices within the institution, it becomes difficult. So I applaud the research that we've heard about, and the campus Me Too, the Akili Dada research. And I think for me, the issue is how we make the connections to have more solidarity, so that the voices are coming from all across the continent to speak out and to name and shame, even as, and it's not easy. It is very, very far from easy. But I think just to begin to continue pushing, so that some of these things have resonance at a much wider level and with much louder voices.
Thank you.
I think as we are thinking about how we're capacitating tertiary educations across the continent, there's really a drive to make sure that we are improving and becoming on a par with a lot of the Western institutions that are out there. I think we need to think about not only naming and shaming, but also a registry of sorts of academics who have actually are sexual predators. And I know it's quite an extreme solution, but really thinking about naming and shaming and making sure that we know who those people are who cannot be working in these institutions. And as much as we are training our teachers and thinking about how we are giving them what they need to be successful in their jobs, what does it take to actually make sure that we are training them to think about how they are treating young girls or young men for that matter, and what that looks like and what is appropriate and what is not. I think there's just a general education that has to happen of our teachers and our professors in those spaces, and making sure that that is a core element or core requirement of any training that happens within the educational institutions. And I think even when you are screening, I'm thinking about what the minimum screening requirements are for educators who are going to be walking into these spaces. What do you need to provide to make sure that you know that you are not one of these people. It's really systematic stuff that needs to start at the very core, not just something that we can treat after the fact when it's too late.
Thank you very much. So a round of applause to the amazing panelists.